Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So today we'll be continuing on to part 3 of our Star Wars Bad Tactics series. We've been covering all the major battles of the original trilogy, and now we arrive to the finale on Endor, one of the most pivotal moments in Star Wars history. The goal was simple for both sides. The Rebel Alliance wanted to take out the Emperor, who they had found was personally overseeing the construction of the second Death Star. The Galactic Empire comes to the playing field with the second Death Star, the Super Star Destroyer Executor, 27 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, and several other supporting ships, including interdictors. It was said that this was one of the largest fleets of Star Destroyers ever assembled, which is kinda hard to believe seeing that the Empire has over 25,000 Imperial-class Star Destroyers. The Rebels also managed to scrounge together one of the largest fleets they've ever put together. This was centered around 8 MC-80 Mon Calamari cruisers and a hodgepodge of frigates, corvettes, and gunships. It was a more even fight than the Battle of Yavin, but the Rebels were still hopelessly outgunned. The Rebel Alliance strategy relied on a ground team to land on the forest moon of Endor and take out the shield generator, which was protecting the battle station while it was being built. They used a small team to infiltrate the moon's planetary shield in a stolen Imperial shuttle. Vader sends Luke on the shuttle, but let the Rebels proceed to the moon's surface. Why does he do this? Well, the Emperor wants the Rebels to be fully engaged in their attack before he springs his trap. So allowing the Rebel Pathfinder team to land is all a part of the plan. Endor has mountains, savannas, and forests. For some reason, the shield generator was hidden inside of one of the forest biomes. This made it much easier for the Rebels to infiltrate, and on top of that, the area had multiple tribes of hostile Ewoks. While they made a great food source, they were also extremely dangerous. A better place for the Empire to have located their shield generator would have been in a more mountainous area. Because of their planetary shield, they didn't really have to worry about concealing themselves to orbital bombardment. When the Rebel ground assault team meets the Ewoks, they fail to communicate with their potential allies. Apparently, the night before the Rebel assault, the Ewoks had decided to assist the Rebels in the upcoming battle, but no joint strategy was created. Luckily, everything worked out fine. The next day, the Imperials spring their trap on Han and the Rebel ground team, but in return the Ewoks spring their traps on the Imperials, and somehow this small band of Rebel fighters and aliens manage to overwhelm an entire legion of stormtroopers. And not just any legion, but the 501st. That's right, a few thousand of the best trained stormtroopers in the Corps are sent screaming by 2-foot-tall teddy bears armed with primitive bows and melee weapons. Now, above the moon, the Emperor had hidden most of his ships on the far side of Endor. The second Death Star appears more or less alone. The Rebel ships appear in system in battle formation and charge forward towards their target. Lando Calrissian senses a trap and was able to turn away most of the fleet as the battle station's superweapon went online. The Imperial fleet appears, and suddenly the Rebels find themselves engaged from all sides by TIE fighters as Imperial capital ships begin penning in the Rebel fleet. Lando Calrissian did a great job recognizing that the Death Star was still active, but he shouldn't have ordered a retreat to a further distance away from the Death Star. Besides calling an abort to the mission, the best tactic for the Rebels would have been to hug the battle station as closely as possible. The Death Star's main weapons were fixed and therefore relatively easy to avoid. By pulling yourself closer to the Death Star and outside of its firing arc, you eliminate any chance of it hitting your ship. The second, less important reason is that the Imperial fleet might hesitate on shooting at your ship if you're so close to the Death Star, despite the fact that the battle station is shielded. Lando and Admiral Akbar instead command their fleet to get as close as possible to the Imperial Star Destroyers. That isn't necessarily the best idea. Up till this point, the Imperial capital ships had maintained their distance from the Rebel fleet and were not engaged. By getting close to them, Lando was prematurely escalating the battle, when what the Rebels really needed was to buy more time for the ground team. On top of that, at close range, only the Mon Calamari cruisers could really go toe-to-toe with the Imperial-class Star Destroyer. Anything smaller would get ripped to pieces, creating unnecessary losses. For smaller ships like corvettes and snub fighters, the main gun of the Death Star wasn't really much of a threat either. They could have remained huddled around the area of the Death Star that was unfinished and most likely lacking any point defense weapons or turbo lasers. On the other side, the Imperials also made a crucial mistake by not engaging the Rebel fleet and waiting for the Death Star to come online. They only sent their TIE fighters into attack. With the Rebels facing only a small portion of the Imperial fleet, they could hold their ground. The Empire would have won a quick victory had they immediately engaged the Rebel ships with their capital ships. and there was no reason to maintain a blockade because they already had interdictor cruisers in position to cut off any escape. A quick victory was spoiled because the Emperor gets a sadistic pleasure from seeing his enemies being disintegrated by his superweapon. People who fail a lot learn that a plan A isn't always enough. You also need a plan B, a plan C, E, and so on. That's something the rebels really understood. They had a lot of failures, and they also had a lot of redundancies as a result. For instance, their snub fighters had shields, hyperdrives, and the MC-80 was famous for having an extremely strong shield due to the redundant power generators on board. But if you look at the Empire, the TIE fighters were more or less a one-shot deal. If you messed up, you died. The same thing could be said with the second Death Star. Despite being a super weapon, it was still unfinished with parts of its superstructure exposed. The only thing that was really protecting it was that one shield generator, and it wasn't even located on board. It probably would have been a better idea for the Empire to have created a shield generator network that could have been placed at multiple locations, making it harder for the rebels to take down. The other thing they could have done was just create at least one backup generator. Now, the second the shields did go down, I would have called for an evacuation of all high-level personnel. But of course, Emperor Palpatine was having fun with Luke and Vader. He clearly thought that the battle was won before it even started. While things were slowly unraveling outside, he was focusing on turning Luke to the dark side. Why didn't he just wait for the battle to be over? Better yet, the Emperor could have led his forces to victory and made Luke watch. That probably would have pissed off Luke more than anything and driven him closer to the dark side. And while Lando and Wedge were on their way to deliver a plasma enema to the Death Star, the Emperor was still busy electrocuting Luke, which was his final mistake. If Thrawn had been in charge of this battle, the Rebel fleet would have been destroyed within minutes. Instead of being vaporized, the Imperial High Command would be enjoying a celebratory feast of Ewok meat. A lesser skilled admiral like Ray Sloan still could have easily won the day. Even our other host Ben, the lowly Imperial weapons officer, would have done a better job. A good commander will take every possible advantage that they can get. Even if they're completely sure that they're going to win, they're still going to find the optimal way to win a battle and assure a quick and casualty-free victory. A bad commander, however, will let his personal desires outweigh logical decisions. Palpatine was a brilliant strategic mind, especially when he was the underdog. One of only 2 Sith Lords in the entire galaxy. He and his master carefully and slowly engineered one of the most brilliant takeovers and coups in Star Wars history. But after a few decades of peace and fighting poorly armed freedom fighters, I believe the old man had lost his mind. I mean, just look at the design of his throne room. It makes no sense. Not only is it on the surface of the Death Star, it's located on a thin spire that juts out into space. It's an easy target if the shields ever go down. Guys, I do hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please don't take my criticism too seriously. We do all have to remember that battlefield tactics comes secondary to story. Because without a great story, all you have is just the battle in space, not a space opera. Now guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of this series. We'll probably continue this maybe next week, and we'll talk about the prequel series and maybe Rogue One. And a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. If you guys were commanding this battle, well, The Force Awakens probably would be a lot more different. Probably wouldn't be called that. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.